Hey folks, got two things we want to cover from recent stories that have been in the morning news. There is a story from my past I would like to tell you, which is going to be pretty relevant for the main events that are coming up in the coming years to maybe a decade or two. Let's start with what we were discussing yesterday, this induction into the mantle. This is something that every month or so they get a new paper out on this. They are furthering their understanding. After the infancy of the recognition of the fact that these geomagnetically induced currents do make it all the way down to the mantle, they very much hit a wall. It's very hard to progress this science because we can't actually get down there and measure a lot of these things. Other than the most basic of detections, it's very slow going. But it's a very important thing to remember, because it's not just the atmosphere, the crust, and the mantle, but it's where the crust and mantle meet. That thermoelectric equilibrium that is locking the crust to the mantle. Again, thermoelectric equilibrium. That's the only thing that locks it there. And when we get a big enough current surge through from a super flare or a solar micronova, that current, electric, could disrupt the electrical aspect of that thermoelectric equilibrium, and then the ohmic heating or resistive heating of it going through the rock is going to really mess with the thermal side of it as well. This is the kind of thing where I don't think at the current rate that the science is progressing, they're going to get over to that hurdle, but it's something that observers need to understand, and it's going to be one of the primary factors that unlocks the crust from the mantle and actually causes the Earth to tilt over. Causes the crust to displace, cause the swaying to and fro like a drunkard if you go by the book, etc. So keep that one in mind. What we were talking about this morning was the Kuroshio current and its meander, how this has been the longest, a record-breaking meander for the Kuroshio current. And as I briefly mentioned in the morning show, and as many of you picked up on very quickly, I want to give you credit for that. This is exactly like the problems that the Gulf Stream is having. This is exactly like the slowdown of the Atlantic Meridional Overturning Circulation, the AMOC. And when you add in the fact that the cold climate bomb of the Beaufort Gyre is getting ready to release into the oceans, we are seeing the oceanic aspect of this really destabilizing in a pretty significant way. What we are seeing now with the Kuroshio current and its record meander, that's the kind of thing where to have this kind of a jump to this record of an event in a normal geologic situation, normal geophysical situation, this should take centuries to see something like this. And it just happened like that. So in terms of how rapidly aspects of the biosphere, different layers of the Earth are destabilizing, clock is ticking, things are heating up, they are moving faster and faster. This should not come as a surprise to any of the observers, but every time we see a new piece of evidence like this, we saw it a couple years ago with the ionosphere and its sustained disruption. We saw it over the last couple of years with the rotation speed of Earth changing. Every time one of these happens, it really kind of brings us back home, hits hard with the idea again that yes, this is really happening and things are speeding up. Now, I want to take a moment to mention that if you have not seen the Earth disaster video, the one where we combined over 100 hours and more than 90 videos of our Earth disaster playlist down into one video that's only 16 minutes and 45 seconds, absolutely need to watch that. It tells the story of all of the different stories telling the same story. There's only so many coincidences you can ignore. But I'd like to tell another one right now. Years ago, I was at one of the Thunderbolts conferences, and one of the gentlemen there figured out a way to have water hold static electric charge within a bottle. And he was going around telling people, stick your finger in there and you'd get shocked. My eye twitched for about 3 days. I was kind of upset with the dude after that, but I kept up with it. And some of the people who knew about what he was doing actually did an experiment. Now, as you might imagine, this has been very challenging for them to get into peer-reviewed journals and other things like that. It doesn't meet a lot of the scientific ethics standards because it's literally shocking people. After the US government did those experiments, they very much frown upon doing things like that. But these guys are friends of mine and they gave me the data. They've got hundreds of people that they did this to. They applied a similar shock. But they divided them into two groups: generally healthy physically, generally unhealthy physically, and subgroups, people who were generally healthy or positive mentally, and those who were generally negative mentally or unhealthy. And what they found was there was a range of reactions to getting shocked. Everything from zap, ooh, and like people were actually excited. Like, yeah, it hurt for a moment, but they were like, wow, what was that? Like, that was interesting. They almost laughed. They smiled. You could see their face light up according to their notes. And other people, it immediately sent them into a tizzy. Some people, it dropped them to their knees. Now, we think back to the idea that men's hearts will fail them, something that's not just in the Bible. That is in all of the stories from all over the world. People just drop. And there's a big question as to what is the dividing line, because obviously it doesn't happen to everybody. A significant fraction of the people, when that major induction of current happens, they are no more. Well, it just so happened that the people who were unhealthy, the people who had the negative mental aspect, they're the ones who went into a tizzy. They're the ones who dropped to their knees. The people who were positive in terms of being healthy and having a positive mindset, they were the ones whose faces lit up. They were the ones who smiled. They were the ones who were excited by the experiment and wanted to know more, wanted to know how it was going. I think this is the key. This is a huge aspect, and this goes beyond just your diet, your physical health, and things like that. This has to do with how well you mentally handle what's going on. And I don't just mean the things I've talked about before: healing traumas, making sure that your insecurities and your negative behaviors are fixed. This is about your outlook on the world. I mean, they were even asking people questions of, what do you think the path of the world is today? And while the vast majority of them didn't say good, some were hopeful and some were just outright negative about what was going to happen. They were angry, they were upset, they had pessimistic beliefs. These are the individuals who responded the worst to that static shock. Now, it is absolutely natural to take a look at what's going on in the world today, especially the observers who know what's going on in the natural order of things with the 12,000-year cycle, and not have a positive outlook, not be optimistic. I get it. That would be perfectly natural. Got to overcome that somehow. Realize that this is all following the plot to a T. Every time something comes up and it seems like the clown world is becoming even more clownish, just know that the right response is not to get angry. It's not to be upset. It's not to be depressed, even though it is a depressing thing. The correct response is to say, this is all following the plot. Give yourself a little smile. Try to think something positive out of it. It could just save your life when the micronova hits. I can tell you this much: it would be a darn shame if you had the perfect location, had the perfect preps, all the perfect planning for everything, and because of your mental state, you were one of the people whose hearts failed them, simply because of how you chose to see the world and how you chose to react to it. Something to keep in mind. Last thing I want to mention, in addition to the link to that Earth disaster video down below, which you should watch if you haven't, you should follow me on Twitter. That link is down there below, and you also have a link to Observer Ranch. Guys, time is running out. As progress is being made with any kind of thing, there's no other way to say this, but the valuation goes up, which means the cost per share is going up. If you are interested in being a part of Observer Ranch in any way, I would go to observerranch.com and send us an email post haste. Other than that, I'll see you in the morning for the daily show. Be safe, everyone.